This podcast is a proud member of PodNation Media Network.
Flicker of reels, the shadows crawl. Curtains rise, a ghostly sprawl. The frames are whispers, the stories call. The tractors hum in a hollow tune. Moonlight cuts through velvet gloom. Is it a dream or a real too soon? Step into the screen where the dark turns keen. Journey with the cinephile, unseen, unseen. The veils twist and turn as the silent light burns. A world unknown where the shadows yearn.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that on episode 314. I am your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. So for this one here, this is going to be my Italian horror episode number 23. The two featured reviews here, this is going to be a Fulci double feature of Aenigma and Dracula in the Provinces. So Aenigma was the first one that I checked out here. This is the highest rated one that I hadn't seen yet, where Dracula in the Provinces is a Voyage to the Fives, so it kind of worked out there how we compare that up. And then I have another Voyage to the Fives rewatch here of Bloody Pit of Horror. This is from 1965. I got to check out a screener of The Blade Cuts Deeper, and then I also got to check out something on Tubi here of somebody reached out to ask if I would watch it, The Voice of Shadows, and then I gave a rewatch to Final Destination Bloodlines at the 2025 watch, gave a screener for a documentary of Siege of Ape Canyon, and then another screener here of a short of Terroir, kind of getting to what that title has to do with there, and then I also gave a watch to the final two episodes of The Trouble with Tessa. Had some time this weekend where me and my son were just kind of hanging out, and then I'm also going to be doing a screener or critic copy review of a Martin Scorsese book that I kind of showed everybody earlier. It's going to be Martin Scorsese, his life, his work, something along those lines. I'll get the title right when I'm actually doing the review. So I just kind of want to give you that information here, as I'm going to go ahead and say thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy. Come on this journey with me.
Just wait until Father gets home. Those words chilled us all as a child. Now they can thrill us as adults. My name is Dan B. Fierce, author of the book Father Figure, Suspenseful Tales of Fatherhood. The calloused hands of fear will wrap around the mind in this roller coaster collection of extreme, gory, and psychological short stories and flash fiction. Get your copy of Father Figure today at danbfiercebooks.com.
And for my first mini review here is going to be an Italian horror month Voyage to the Fives rewatch of Bloody Pit of Horror, which goes by the original title of Il Boia Scarlatto. So it's from 1965, directed by Massimo Pupillo. Now this was written by Romano Migliorni and Roberto Natali. This stars Mickey Haggerty, Walter Brandi, and Ralph Zucker. So this is an Italian serial killer slasher crime horror thriller film that is from Italy. Currently sitting on a 4.5 on IMDb and a 2.6 on Letterboxd for a synopsis being. A photographer and models go to an abandoned castle to shoot sexy covers for horror novels. Unbeknownst to them, the castle is haunted by a lunatic executioner from the 17th century. So I learned about this one originally from the Fangoria Top 300 Horror Movies issue. I started to work through that to expand my horror movie knowledge right after college, so I've seen this one a few times. This most recent watch here for this Voyage to the Fives, like I was saying, also was one that I've been intrigued to revisit now that I'm a more seasoned cinephile. So what I'm going to go ahead and start is that this is claiming to be based on a Marquis de Sade work. From what I've read, it's loosely based. It's still crazy and scary that men like this really existed, torturing people for various reasons. I do like seeing the different forms of torture and the devices used. So all that set up, let's kind of get that we have a basic setup. It's interesting that our group that we're following here are trying to do covers for horror novels. They end up in the best place possible, belonging to the Crimson Executioner. The backstory there is good as well. This maniac was a sadist, enjoying the pleasure from seeing people be tortured. What doesn't work, though, is that it doesn't do well in hiding the truth of what is happening in the modern times. So there's some other themes here I've noticed about like perfection, especially because we have Travis Anderson portrayed by Haggerty, who is a former actor, and he used to be a bodybuilder as well before he kind of just disappeared and fell off the face of the earth. Now there's some random stuff kind of happening here where Edith, who was his fiance, is portrayed by Luisa Barato. Now she ends up with this group here. There's also some misogyny, as most of the victims that we see in the past and present are women. This would fall into like early exploitation. There's also a modern gothic feel here since it takes place in a castle but in modern times. So that should be enough for the story. Let's go over to the filmmaking aspects. Cinematography effectively captures the solid castle setting, particularly the dungeon reminiscent of like old dark house films. The various torture devices are good, though some are clearly fake, limiting the effects. The bright color of the blood is something that I'm a mark for. The soundtrack builds atmosphere well, except for a jarring, whimsical moment during the picture-taking scenes. So the biggest sin here is just this is boring, unfortunately. All it's left then to beat some actor performances. Haggerty is good. Build for this eccentric recluse. I would also give credit here to his two henchmen of Gino Turini as well as Roberto Messina. I'd also say that Brandy was solid as our lead. Barato works as the female one. I'd also say here that Zucker. Then we also have Alfredo Rizzo and Albert Gordon. They work in their roles. The women are all gorgeous, so credit to them. Now these are going to be like Rita Klein. There's Barbara Nelly, Moa Tahi, and I think that is, and then Barato would also kind of fall into there as well. And then there's Femi Banusi. I think everybody's kind of just limited in what they're doing. I think part of that's a script. No one truly stands out for their performance. I do feel like they do well, so credit there. Inclusion, this is an early exploitation cinema piece, features models and a photographer in a haunted castle who becomes a victim of the Crimson Executioner. This creates an oppressive modern gothic atmosphere with effective cinematography and music, featuring interesting but obviously fake torture devices. However, it fails as a mystery by revealing the killer too early. It focuses on narcissism and misogyny, firmly place it in the exploitation genre. Despite some serviceable acting, the script is limiting. It's worthwhile yet flawed watch for horror fans exploring exploitation and gothic horror origins. So my rating here for Bloody Pit of Horror, it's not a great film. I give it a 5.5 out of 10 this time around. Then up next I have a screener here of The Blade Cuts Deeper. This is from 2024, getting its wide release here soon, I believe. But this is directed by Gene Dolders, who also co-wrote this with A.J. Ballard. This stars John Truart, Kristen Japp, and Peter Durr. Now, so this is a Norwegian horror film that is actually from the United Kingdom. Currently sitting on an 8.5 on IMDb, and not enough ratings on Letterboxd for an average. I think I might be one of the only people that's actually given it a rating over there. But the synopsis is, content has consequences in this giallo-inspired slasher. So I got a chance to see this when the co-writer-director here of Dolders reached out. He checked to see if I was interested in watching for a review and sent over a screener link. Now, for me, just knowing something's in the horror genre, I'll more than likely check it out. This looks to be doing festival rounds now, so I'm going to consider it a 2025 horror film for the moment. But the whole thing here is that we're actually following a TV show. It's like a true crime thing that is hosted by John Abbott, portrayed by Truart. And then we have these kills that are kind of happening to people that are involved with the production. So where I'm going to start here is that we have a meta approach because it starts with John and we get to see the show and like the runner, he's the runner for it. Like he seems to be the creator. He's also the host. It's a bit jarring. I will say that. What I like though is this factors in later and it makes more sense and an interesting way to show and not necessarily tell the viewer the backstory information. So from there, the subgenres that I've kind of given are, in the synopsis, it's kind of interesting here that this is giallo inspired and those kind of spark the slasher films. I do like the stylistic choices that we give this film flair. It's easy to figure out who the killer was if you're paying attention. That's not something that's necessarily important though. What makes this a slasher film is that it's more about the kills. Our maniac is wearing black gloves. His spree is fueled by trauma, which are also kind of hallmarks of giallo. So the last part of the story that I want to look at would be the undercurrent. Our showrunner and host, John's true crime show, exploits real victims for profit, critiquing capitalism there in my opinion. So John is also harsh on his production team. He is directly rude to the head of security, Rita, portrayed by Lindsay Bennett Thompson, as well as the editor, who is Nathan, portrayed by Saul Murphy. There's also some interactions here with the episode artist for the posters, who is Gil, portrayed by Lucy Renton, and then the writer is Jackson, portrayed by James Podmore. There's some interesting things how they kind of play out and how things factor back in. I will say that for a slasher film, they either need to have good characters or kills, and let's move over to the acting performances then. Truart works as our lead. I get the idea that he's the one that our maniac is truly after. He's just taking his time to get there. I'd say Kristen Japp, who is portraying Olivia, she's an actress, she was fine. Murphy, Bennett Thompson, Renton, and Podmore are all solid as these different characters who are potential victims. I also give credit here to Quentin J. Gray, who is a new security guard. I like him in his role. I did want to give credit as well to Durr, as we see him on a limited basis. What he does and how he fits into everything it works. The cast just kind of fit. All it's left to be some filmmaking aspects. The giallo elements of this are the strongest point. The cinematography and framing are good. The studio setting is fitting as it explains the killer's motivation. The maniac's POV shots, I thought those were good, including the black gloves. They effectively conceal the identity. The practical effects are impressively brutal. I did want to give major credit there. We get to see some things that I didn't expect him to go to. Soundtrack works as well. My main complaint is that this is inherently slow-paced, being in this subgenres. In conclusion, this is a compelling giallo-inspired slasher that successfully blends subgenre conventions into a meta-critique of true crime, media, and capitalism. While the slow pace and easily identifiable killer make it a slight DG track for some viewers, this excels as a stylistic choices, strong cinematography, and brutal practical effects. Dolders and Ballard deliver a story which has content, has consequences, elevated by solid performances from the ensemble cast. It's a stylish, thematically rich horror entry and delivers on its premise, making this a film worth seeking out, especially for fans of giallo aesthetics. So my rating here for The Blade Cuts Deep, I gave this one a 7 out of 10. And keep an eye out for this one here, as I do hope this one finds some distribution and streaming soon. Then up next was a movie I got to ask to be checked out. Here is going to be Voice of Shadows. This is technically from 2023. I think it did some festival stuff then and got a wider release in 2024. And then this is written and directed by Nicholas Bain. This stars Guillermo Blanco, Corian Mika, and Maria Jose Vargas Agudelo. This is a supernatural horror film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 3.6 on IMDb and not enough ratings over on Letterboxd, so I would say about a 2 to a 2.5 star movie over there, with a synopsis being: a working class woman stands to inherit an estate if she and her boyfriend abide by a bizarre set of stipulations. So this one I got to check out when the production company Arc Entertainment reached out to see if I would check it out for review. So this is streaming on Tubi, so that made it easy. I will say, though, I thought that the poster looked cool, but it also made me leery because I've seen similar ones out there, and especially on this streaming service, so it always made me kind of leery that this is going to be generic. But this also seemed to start its festival appearances in 2023, making it a Traverse to the Threes watch for me. So where I'm going to go ahead and start is that this has some interesting elements. I like that we learn about Gabriel's backstory before we see that, like, how he fits into the story. He is the voice of reason for his girlfriend of Emma, and Gabriel is portrayed by Blanco. She's portrayed by Mika. And then we end up seeing that Emma is blinded for the love of her aunt Milda, and the prospects provided from the will after Milda passes away. So Milda is portrayed by Jane Hamill. Now, Gabriel dealt with dark things in his youth and prepared him for the heavy things that kind of get faced to him here. Thought that was a good touch. So something to incorporate here would be religion. We are following characters of Hispanic descent. It's interesting that Milda was a former nun who is dealing with a traumatic event herself. She's turned her back on the church. Gabriel doesn't necessarily seem like somebody who goes to church every Sunday, but it seems more due to life and making ends meet. And I will say, though, we get to see him originally to start this off at confession. Religion is truly ingrained in the makeup of these characters, and that's something that we're doing due to their upbringing, so it makes sense. Now, there's something else interesting here that I found, is that within the home of Milda, there's a book that looks to be used in the dark rites. There's upside-down pentagrams on it. Inside is a page where we have, like, the devil's head and names inside of a pentagram, or the devil's head inside of a pentagram, but then the names are kind of all around it. Gabriel brings us to a Father James, who is portrayed by B. Vang. Now, at first, he doesn't give it much weight. He points out how certain symbols are taken by bad people and perverted. He actually uses the Nazi symbol as part of that, but that's until he sees a page with the names on it. I did like the immediate change that we got there, and it seems to have spooked him. It's enough to make him believe as well. So that should be enough for the story. Let's go over to the acting performances. I will say, for the most part, they're fine. Blanco works as our lead, who knows something isn't right and is trying to protect those that he loves. I like that we get a baseline for Mika before she starts to act different, and the longer that goes on, the worse that becomes, that they're in the house, that is. Agudelo is fine in her role. She is portraying Celeste. I believe this is Gabriel's little sister, but I could be wrong on that. I don't know if that ever gets truly established, but she does live with them. So she disappears for a long stretch. Now Hamill works as Milda, who becomes this haunting figure. I'd also give credit here to Michael Paul Levin, who is Father John. There's Martin Harris, who's Ernesto. I'd also give credit to Vang and the rest of the characters. Kind of worked for what was needed. All that's left, that'd be the filmmaking aspects. I do think the cinematography and framing were fine. This does rely on jump scares colors, which I'm not always a fan of. It does build an eerie atmosphere, so credit there. There isn't much in the way of effects. I'm guessing that's because of CGI. What was creepy would be the look of the people that are changed like Milda. Other than that, the soundtrack fit for what was needed with an eerie feel. My biggest issue is that this feels generic. What is creepy has been done elsewhere, in my opinion. In conclusion, this presents an interesting foundation, particularly with the established backstory of Gabriel and the effective incorporation of religious themes in the unsettling Book of Dark Rites. While the acting performances are generally solid, especially Blanco and Mika's initial work, the film ultimately suffers from the feeling of generic familiarity. Despite building a credible, eerie atmosphere and utilizing effective cinematography, the reliance on jump scares and the sense that the core elements have been executed more uniquely elsewhere prevent the film from truly standing out, making it a decent but unremarkable addition to the horror genre on Tubi. So my rating here, like I said, didn't hate it or anything like that, but I've said my piece, so I gave it a 5 out of 10. Then I have a rewatch here for something I checked out earlier this year, which is going to be Final Destination Bloodlines. This is this is from 2025, directed between Zach Lipovinsky and Adam B. Stein. Now, the screenplay was written by Guy Busick and Laurie Evans Taylor, while the story was done by Busick, Taylor, and John Watts, and then they're giving credit here to the characters created by Jeffrey Riddick. So this is starring Caitlin Santayana, Teo Bryans, and Raya Kilstead. And then this is a dark comedy, splatter, supernatural, teen horror thriller film that is from a co-production of the United States and Canada. This is currently sitting on a 6.7 on IMDb and a 3.2 on Letterboxd, or a synopsis being plagued by reoccurring violent nightmares. A college student returns home to find the one person who can break the cycle and save her family from the horrific fate that inevitably awaits them. So that college student is going to be, Ioana is playing it, and she is Stephanie Reyes. So we are following her as she's a college student who's tormented by this violently reoccurring nightmare. She goes home to find the person that is... It takes some time, but this is actually going to be her grandmother, who is Iris, and we get to see her in the opening thing. And then, she's obviously got much older, and she's played by Breck Bessinger in the past. So it starts in 1960. She had a premonition at a restaurant at the top of a Space Needle type thing that sets the events in motion. Stephanie's nightmare is a recurring vision. After death finally gets to Iris, a chain of events are set in motion that puts Stephanie and her family at risk. So I found this to be entertaining and a welcome return to form for the franchise. The opening premonition is a highlight, as one of my favorites in the series, effectively utilizing the Space Needle setting with brutal deaths. The subtitle Bloodlines refers to past events, which is Iris's nightmare, now haunting Stephanie as death torments her to close the loop. The central theme here is the futility of fearing death, noting that Iris's attempt to defeat it only brought tragedy and fear to her family. This also is an interesting redemption tale following Iris as an older woman played by Gabriela Rose, and then her daughter Darlene portrayed by Kilstead, and then even Uncle Howard, who's portrayed by Alex Zahara. The performances are solid, with special mention here to Ioana for what she did. This also features the final performance of Tony Todd, or at least one of them. It was a poignant performance, which it was very tearful and a loving send-off because he was allowed to kind of do whatever he wanted to there. I also think that the cinematography, sound design, and the subtle setup of like the Rube Goldberg style death sequences, the CGI is a little bit uneven, and the practical effects are brutal yet as well as enjoyable because of it. So I would like a little bit more narrative connection to the franchise's past, and ultimately that it's still a satisfying installment, but if they could have just connected a little bit more dots, if they do that in the future, that could help me as well. But for me, my rating stayed stat and pat here. I really enjoyed this one, and I give Final Destination Bloodlines a 7.5 out of 10. And if you'd like to hear a featured review, though, a little bit more information, it's going to be episode 296, Voyage of the Fives, number 12, where I had this paired up with The Ghost Goes West. Then I got to check this out as a screener. It's going to be The Siege of Ape Canyon. This is from 2025, directed by Eli Watson, and it's featuring Mark Myrcel. I think it might be how you say his name. If it's not, I do apologize. But this is an adventure documentary history horror film that's from the United States. Now, it's not able to be rated yet on IMDb, and then over on Letterboxd, there's not enough ratings as of yet. But the synopsis is, in 1924, gold prospectors led by Fred Beck claimed that they were attacked by ape-like creatures in Washington. This documentary features interviews, analysis, and footage revealing the truth behind the infamous encounter. So it's a documentary I got the chance to check out thanks to Justin Cook. So there's another one from the Small Town Monsters production company. What's interesting is that this isn't done by Seth Breedlove. Our director is Watson. That piqued my intrigue to see how similar or different this would be. I wasn't familiar with the incident that is the basis of this, but I have heard of Ape Canyon in the past. So let's learn about the incident. Like synopsis said, it took place in 1924. Fred, along with a group of miners, were staying in a cabin. They were set upon by a group of animals that they believed to be Sasquatches. Sasquatch? I don't know how to say that. There are a famous book here about the ordeal that was written by Fred's son, Ronald. The issue, though, is that the interviews took place quite a bit after everything happened. There's speculation that Ronald took some liberties and sensationalized it. So documentary follows a local expert of Marseille, who is interviewed along with others about the incident and the evidence of the cryptid. So Mark's deep pursuit of the truth is commendable, particularly with this incident that was reportedly refuted by a hoax as like children who encountered the miners and then decided to sneak out of their camp and then to mess with them. So Mark uses contemporary newspaper accounts from the time the Associated Press wire began. He presents his research objectively without trying to convince the viewer. That's not that's done here. Mark has sought out the survivors of the incident. Now, this sounds like most of them have already passed away, so he's shifted to looking for their relatives. This added heart, talking to like a daughter of one of the miners. She didn't know anything about the story until meeting him. Mark does seem to be able to find the daughter and grandchildren of Fred as well. They actually start to help in the search for the mine. So what's interesting here is that Mark has actually found the site of the cabin. It was thought to be lost. This happened back in 2013, and so it hasn't been completely lost to time. It's almost like a local myth. He still wasn't able to discover the location of the mine itself as of yet. He hasn't given up, and he seems to be continuing that search. I will say the people interviewed are interesting. It truly falls on Mark's shoulders, though. It's commendable that all this hard work that has kept this alive. He's also been able to prevent this from becoming just like a tall tale. There's truth here. I will say that there's a slightly different approach than I'm used to for this documentary team. It's still well made. The cinematography, framing, and being able to show the areas that they're talking about is good. I'm a big fan here of editing in of old maps and photographs as a good touch as well. So in conclusion, this offers a compelling and well-produced deep dive into the infamous 1924 incident, distinguishing itself even within the small-town monsters catalog thanks to Watson's direction. Now, the documentary hinges on the diligent, objective research of a local expert, Marseille, whose efforts to locate the historic cabin site and connect with the miners' descendants lead a significant emotional weight and credibility to the decades-old story. While the film retains the quality cinematography and careful editing expected of the production company, it provides a slightly different, more grounded approach, ultimately succeeding in transforming what could have been mere local folklore back into a serious subject of investigation. So my rating here for The Siege of Ape Canyon, I give this one a 7 out of 10 and would recommend checking this out when it is fully available, which I believe actually here should be soon on VOD. Then I have a short film that I'm going to cover here of Terroir. I think that's how I might say that, Terroir. This is from 2025, written and directed by Casey Rogerson. This is starring Madison Hu, Lena Rideout, and Naomi Rubin. This is a comedy horror short that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 9.0 on IMDb, and not enough ratings, but I would say probably like most people are giving it a 5-star, but I would say between like a 3 and a 3.5 star over on Letterboxd with a synopsis being: a young wine critic returns to a French vineyard 1 year after giving a bad review. There, she and her friends become the target of a masked killer. So I got the chance to see this as a screener thanks to Karen from KOPR. Seeing that this was a horror short doing its festival rounds, I was intrigued. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't realize that this was a short until I settled in to watch it. Now, I did know a little bit of limited information that I saw that this was going to be about wine. Other than that, I came into this blind. So we start this at the wine tasting. We have Kirsta, portrayed by Hugh, is the wine critic from the synopsis. Her mother is the editor and seems like the chief of this publication that she works for. Due to that, Kirsta takes advantage of bringing her two friends, Rebecca, portrayed by Ruben, and Oliver, portrayed by John R. Howley, on this trip to France to do these tastings at vineyards. So they came to this one here last year, and it had rated as one of the lower ones that they had visited. Now, something has drastically changed. They're impressed with the wine, and Kirsta wants to check out the grapes to see if she can figure out anything as to why. There has been a change to the Terroir, which I actually didn't realize that this is a specific reason why they were invited back. So Madame Laurent, portrayed by Rideout, and her son Pierre, portrayed by Joao Santos, have revenge on their mind. So that's really my recap and introduction to the characters. Where I want to start is how I judge shorts. They either have to fall into two categories usually for me. The first could be that it's fleshed out into a larger concept, or do they tell a complete story? In my opinion, this is the latter. We get a good setup, we learn about our group that we're following as well as about their hosts before this revenge plot gets put into motion. I wanted to give credit to the team for that. Now that I've set up, let's look at our group. Kirsta, Rebecca, and Oliver are obnoxious, but they're knowledgeable about wine. They exploit the vineyards and Kirsta's editor mother to take, a free wine vacation. The title Terroir is a French word sounding like terror and used for comedy with that. This word actually means environmental factors like soil, climate, and topography that go into influencing, in this case, wine. There's an interesting hint here that has an upcoming reveal as well. Then to look at our hosts, we have Madame Laurent and then Pierre have funny introductions. They just kind of appear and it spooks our group. They then disappear. Now, our group is looking for them, and since they aren't around, they're going to go ahead and head outside, check out the vineyards. I do like this gets eerie when Kirsta asks Oliver to go check out a nearby barn. From there, that's where the horror ramps up. Something interesting to also include here is that our group tells their version of a story from the year prior. We then hear from the hosts for their variation. That should be enough for the story. Let's go over to the acting performances. Hugh, Ruben, and Howley are all good as this entitled group of what I'm guessing are like Gen Zers. They are taking advantage, and it's interesting what happens to them. What I will say is that I don't truly believe that there are consequences to their actions, and that's something that'll come back to bite them. Rideout and Santos are good in their roles. Everybody here brings to the table what is needed. All it's left to be filmmaking aspects. The cinematography and framing are good. They're able to capture this vineyard, which is old. The building that they're doing the tasting in has character. The effects that we get are limited, but what we do get to see look good. I like the color of blood that we have here. It's funny because it looks like a rich dark wine, and that's something that gets played for comedy as well. We don't see the kills, but we see the after effects. Those work. Other than that, the soundtrack fit for what was needed. So in conclusion, this is an effective horror short that succeeds in delivering a complete, satisfying narrative arc within its limited runtime. The film cleverly uses the pretentiousness of its main characters and the double meaning of the title to build suspense and dark comedy. While the kills are implied, the strong performances from Hugh, Ruben, Howley as the entitled guest, and Rideout and Santos as the avenging hosts carry the narrative. Paired with fitting cinematography and a strong commitment to its central theme, Terroir proves that a short film can offer a sharp, darkly amusing, and fully realized piece of horror cinema. So my rating here for this one, I'm going to give a 7.5 out of 10. Then I also finished the last 2 episodes of The Trouble with Tessa. So the first one I'll be looking at here is going to be part 5, which is Alone. Tessa's risky decision to recover stolen property leads to them getting trapped in a place not meant to be found or escaped. So let me just pull up my notes here real quick, which is great audio here. But then we actually realize here that Tessa, portrayed by Katrin Nugent, has found a tunnel in her basement. It's known that what she's been doing here from the jump, we actually see how far this plot goes, which is quite creepy. Now, it actually looks like Amelia wanted to leave very earlier on, but Freddy said they couldn't. They needed some more money. He's also afraid of the Bone King. And then I'll just kind of go ahead and say that character is actually portrayed, it's not pulling up in this one because he actually doesn't necessarily appear, Alexander Platt. And then Amelia was being portrayed by Casey Hartnett. Now, we actually get to see a video of her as she's close to the end. She's withering away during her final days. There's also some we actually get to see here that Tessa is watching outside, and Betsy's not using her cane anymore. She's portrayed by Maria Wolf. Something from the tunnel knocks over a pallet, scaring her, but we also see that it might not be as bad as we think. Recording of Amelia plays about, critters in the wall. Mice might be better than rats. And then we actually see Tessa finds her car. It's in Betsy's backyard. She sneaks into her house when she's out getting her mail, and then she comes home looking for her keys. We also kind of realize here that Robert, portrayed by John R. Smith Jr., has been watching her, and then Tessa gets trapped in the basement, finds a laptop, and we actually kind of figure out here that the city might be luring people here to populate it, and if they don't fit, they don't get to stay. This episode that really kind of got under my skin, really liked what they were doing here. I gave this one an 8 out of 10. Then the last episode is called Troubles. It's kind of an interesting one here, but the synopsis is Tessa finally learns the truth about what she's been chasing all along and changes everything they thought they knew about Amelia's fate. Is that Trouble is actually an entity. That's the name of it. Kind of an interesting little thing there. We learned that through this episode. But that is portrayed by Corey Deanne Cowley. I'll say here is that there's some stuff here. People might be necessarily brought here for a couple different reasons. There's something here with breeding, something with feeding, and then actually get to learn a little bit of backstory about Robert, and then it sounds like the politician that Tessa had been messing with and why she had fled here had been assassinated for what she did. And then we actually kind of see here Robert might not be as bad of a guy that everybody, at least Tessa thought. Night is coming and she's in the woods. We actually get a very brutal scene here with a little bit of degloving. We actually see Tessa come to a cave that we've been seeing over and over again. Now, she makes it back to her house, and this is kind of where things have to get figured out. We do actually realize what the trouble truly is, or at least a variation of what that creature is. I rather enjoyed this final episode here, and I really do hope this gets picked up and we get to hear more about the stories that were been provided, because I gave this last episode here a 7 out of 10. Would highly recommend it. I watched it on Screambox. I actually think this is also streaming on Tubi, as I just kind of want this show, to get more. I want more of the story. And then that book I brought up as well is Martin Scorsese, the Iconic Filmmaker, and His Works. This is published here in 2025. I actually think it came out earlier here in November. This is the author here is Ian Nathan, and discover the genius of Martin Scorsese, one of cinema's greatest storytellers. For over 50 years, Scorsese has been one of cinema's most celebrated directors. From a Catholic kid in Manhattan to a legendary filmmaker, he shaped Hollywood with masterpieces such as Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, and The Irishman. But what makes Scorsese's films unique? His stories explore power, morality, and human nature, blending raw emotions with intellectual depth. Whether reinventing noir musicals or crime dramas, his work explores the pulse of America and Italian-American experience. So this delves into all 26 of his films, breaking down his signature themes, iconic collaborations with Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio, his place in film history. A true movie fanatic and preservationist, Scorsese continues to push boundaries, proving that cinema is not just entertainment, it's an art form. So this is the second in the series that I've read from Nathan. What intrigued me is that the Scorsese is a director that I first associated with gangster films, as in, I saw like Goodfellas, Casino, and The Departed. Not The Departed, but I know I was watching some of those early, crime films that he did. It took me reading this that it clicked that he also did the period piece version of like Gangs of New York. It was also during reading this that I figured out there's some major blind spots for me with this director. So I'm a big fan of how Nathan constructs this book by breaking Scorsese's career into interesting sections. Born in the late 1980s, I've always known him as a cinema icon. It's fascinating to learn about his early struggles to avoid being typecast and to make the films that he desired. Reading about his challenges and projects and seeing the accompanying images of how young these figures were is highly engaging. Something to also give credit here is that this is an easy read. Nathan's writing style just flows, and time would fly by as I would get lost in what he was saying. That's something I've always wanted to make sure I give credit for. Now, if I do have a gripe, the version I read is only 176 pages. I do see there's a longer version out there. This doesn't go as deep into the productions like they did when I was reading the David Lynch one. It just seems to kind of gloss over each film. The longer version makes me think that there's more that I'm looking for. I'll just go ahead and thank the team that sent this over the critic copy. This is a beautiful edition that comes with a dust cover. Just something that I would gladly display amongst my collection for sure. And the people that I'm going to give credit here for doing that is going to be Steve Roth from the Quartro Group. So thank you so much for sending this over. It's beautiful, and I really enjoyed checking it out. So in conclusion, this is a highly engaging and easy-to-read overview of Scorsese's career, successfully highlighting his genius beyond the crime genre and exploring his pivotal collaborations. While this 176-page edition proves a beautiful tribute to the director's place in film history and an attractive addition to any collection, the brevity means it often glosses over the deep production details. For fans seeking a concise celebration of Scorsese's filmography and evolution, this one is a compelling read. However, there is a desire for more in-depth analysis of its 26 films, may prefer the longer version. But for what I read here, I really enjoyed this, and I give this an 8 out of 10 as well. And that's all I have here then for mini reviews. Let me go ahead and get you over to the trailer of my first featured review.
Anderson here. No, I can't. I can't leave the hospital right now. I don't even know your name.
The name is Anderson. How could she be from Boston? She doesn't even know the names of the rivers that run through town.
There's something strange about that girl. She has a total recall of another person's memories.
And for my first feature review here is going to be Aenigma from 1987, directed by Lucio Fulci, and who also co-wrote this with Giorgio Marauzzo. Now this stars Jared Martin, Laura Lambertini, and Uli Ranthaler. I think that's how you might pronounce her name. And this also has the likes of Sophie Dialun, Jennifer Naud, Ricardo Ackerby, Kathy Wise, Miliana Zirovechka, Dragan Dejro Gierlich, Lizhana Blagojevic, Francesca Svevic, Duskia Strazevic. I'm mispronouncing a lot of these names, I know that. Zorka Leska, Zoran Lesky, Raid Kolovic. Fulci makes an uncredited appearance, as does Sabrina Ciani. So this is a horror mystery romance thriller film that is from a co-production of Italy and Yugoslavia. This is currently sitting on a 5.1 on IMDb and a 2.8 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis here being: the spirit of a comatose teenage girl possesses the body of a newcomer to her girls' boarding school to enact bloody revenge against the elitist, lingerie-clad co-eds responsible for her condition. So this is one that I didn't know about until getting into horror movie podcasts. Now I knew of the director here of Fulci, who was our co-writer and director, of course, from films like Zombie and City of the Living Dead. So this was one that went on a list to see. For Italian Horror Month here, Fulci is a director that I'm working through some of his deeper cuts, and this was the most popular one that I hadn't seen as of yet. So let's do some featured notes here, and I'll start with our director here, the legend of Fulci. Now, since I cover most of his movies each year, I'm not going to kind of delve too much into it, but I've seen 18 of his 57 features for 31%. I'm now at 18 of 23 in genre for 78%. Top three that I'm missing are Touch of Death, The House of Clocks, and The Sweet House of Horrors. So as a writer, I'm at 13 of 52 for 25%. I've seen 13 of 18 that he's written for 72%. Top three that I'm missing right now are Wax Mask, Touch of Death, and Sodoma's Ghost. So for coming up with a story, he's done this 33 times, and I've seen 10 for 30%. In horror, he has done 14, and I've seen 10 of those for 71%. I'm just missing Wax Mask, Touch of Death, The House of Clocks, and The Sweet House of Horror. So then he also wrote this with Marauzzo. He has 34 features that he's written. I've seen 3, all in genre. The only ones that I'm missing, or the only ones that he did in horror, were going to be this, The Beyond, and The House by the Cemetery. So then coming up with a story, he also did this 10 times. First that I've seen, only one that he's done in genre. Then to our cast. Let's start with Martin. First work of his that I've seen. He has 5 total in horror, with Murder a la Mode, The Lonely Lady, Hydra, and A Rose for Emily are the ones that I haven't seen as of yet. Lambertini has done 7 motion pictures. I've seen 3. Not horror, she was in Red Sonja. I've also seen A Blade in the Dark. So that and this are the only 2 that she's done in genre. Then last, let's look at Rheinethaler. She has 2 films, both from Fulci, as she was in this and Zombie 3. So for this one here, we start this off with a cheesy but fun, almost like theme song with Kathleen, who is portrayed by Zirojevic, as she gets ready for a date. So helping her get ready are Kim Wilkins, portrayed by Diolin, and her boyfriend Tom, portrayed by Bezro Gellik. They are the ones, like I said, that are helping her. Now she's going out with Fred Vernon, who is portrayed by Ackerby. So what's weird here is that, and we'll learn this later, he is a teacher. Like I think he's doing like aerobics, or he's like a gym teacher at this like college. So it turns out to be a prank. Kathy is chased to the road where she is hit by a car as they're all over on like a lover's lane type thing. So Kathy ends up in the hospital. The doctor in charge is Robert Anderson, portrayed by Martin. We see her go in for a scan, and her scans go level, signifying she's brain dead. There's something odd that starts happening from here, though. We then get an interesting shot as we rise out of the hospital, like above, move over to the school, which is St. Mary's College. So we have Eva Gordon, portrayed by Lambertini, as she arrives. She is shown around by a nun who informs her they're making a special case for her, since they don't normally allow students to enroll in the middle of the year. Ava is fresh out of a mental hospital where she had a breakdown. She is shown to her room, where she shares this with Jenny Clark, portrayed by Ryan Thaler. So Ava flirts with Fred, showing up at his door, and they're supposed to be going on a date. Now he doesn't answer. We see the reason being that he's attacked by a doppelganger from a mirror. Eva is inconsistent, claiming to be she's from New Orleans and then denying it later. The head housekeeper, Mary, portrayed by Zigarevich, is Kathy's mother. As a strange events escalate, Robert becomes increasingly involved in solving the mystery and getting too familiar with the students. So that's really my recap and introduction to the characters. Where I want to start is by saying that this feels like Fulci and co-writer Mariuzzo were inspired by the film Patrick. Both have a young person confined to a hospital bed and using telekinesis to influence things around them. This is slightly different where Kathy is possessing Ava. I'm not fully sure why that is the case, though. There are some inconsistencies that I have here. So now that I've set that up, let me kind of delve into things that I thought were good here. Now the plot, a young woman is pranked, falls into a coma, and seeks revenge. Feels like a little bit of, like I was saying earlier, a mix of Carrie and Patrick. So her possession of Ava has some good elements, especially since she's coming off of a mental break. The possession itself is unclear. She may need a body to kind of perceive things around before influencing. Fulci's use of nightmare logic explains the lack of detail, but I just wanted a little bit more for clarity. So then having Kathy getting her revenge on those that wronged her was good. This starts off with Fred, then moving to others like Tom, Kim, Grace O'Neill, portrayed by Nod, and then there's Virginia Williams, portrayed by Wise. It is through these things that the scares and the deaths kind of are things that scare these characters. So it makes for some good set pieces, almost like a Nightmare on Elm Street. So now there's something odd that happens late in this film. It reveals that Robert is a scumbag. Why Jenny is being targeted doesn't fully make sense to me, though, either. So I'll also have to delve into the story. Let's kind of go over to the filmmaking. There's some good stuff here. They do some interesting things with cinematography and framing. An example is showing us something that might not be real, playing with reality and the surreal. There's a great scene in a museum where a painting seems to be bleeding. The effects here are fine, not as strong as some other Fulci films, but they do some interesting things here that are playing on the fears, like I was saying earlier. I do think for the most part the soundtrack is solid as well. It does help build the atmosphere, and credit to the theme song. So all that's left then would be some acting performances. What is interesting is that we truly don't meet our lead, Dr. Anderson, until close to the midway point. He first seems like a minor character. Martin's performance is fine, though. My issue is more with how the character is written. Lambertini and Ryan Thaler round out for the main characters. Both are attractive, along with the group of mean girls, which are like Dialin, Nod, and Wise. Ackerby and Belozhagrevic are solid as well. Zerojevic as the bedridden Spectre works. Zigrek and the rest of the cast kind of rounded this out for what was needed as well. So there's a little bit of trivia here that I wanted to kind of share. It kind of seemed a little bit interesting. This was originally shot in Italian, which was, very classic, dubbed in English, with some shots redone with American actors speaking English. The release in the United States in this version with some actors speaking English on camera, but with an English dubbed soundtrack. This is an odd result of some actors like Jared Martin speaking English on camera, but still obviously dubbed by another voice actor. So this was filmed in November of 1986. On some of the dorm rooms walls of the school are posters like Rocky Balboa and Maverick from Top Gun. Kind of seems a little bit weird with some of these, but I'll digress. There's also, I think, somebody has a Yoda. And this film's plot is oddly similar to an episode of the TV series Smallville. In that episode titled Spirit, a popular teen is comatose after a car accident and possesses everyone she comes into contact with. In this film, the comatose teen is unpopular and exacts her revenge on her tormentors, while also possessing just one other person rather than several people. So not necessarily dead on, but there are some definitely similarities there. So in conclusion, despite some narrative flaws and abrupt character reveal, Aenigma is an enjoyable, stylish Italian horror film. Clearly influenced by Patrick and Carrie, the plot centers on a comatose girl who uses telekinesis to enact her revenge through a new student. Director Fulci delivers on atmosphere whilst with some striking cinematography, surreal imagery like the bleeding painting, and a strong soundtrack. Serviceable acting grounds the horrific scenes. So for Fulci fans, this is a lesser-known work that's subtly unsettling, vengeful horror thrills. Definitely doesn't kind of reach his heights, but I'm still kind of one of those things where, for the most part for me, So even bad Fulci tends to be something I enjoy. So my rating here for Enigma going to be a 6.5 out of 10. I'm also not going to do a spoiler section, so what I'm going to go ahead and do, there's nothing I really kind of delve deeper into that I need to do. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, though, is get you over to the trailer of my second featured review of this double feature of Fulci.
Ecco fatto. Mi sento molto meglio, caro Conte, molto meglio. A proposito, Conte Gradulecu, io sapevo che nei paesi dell'est i titoli nobiliari erano stati aboliti.
Doc mai. Ma vedi, io godere di qualche privilegio
Sì?
per meriti antici e patriottici. I Graduleco furono de molte volte salvatori de patria e mio governo ha permesso usare il nostro castello ai piedi dei monti transilvanici.
Ah, un castello.
Forte, bello. Costruito in 1400. Deceno venite a trovarmi per la weekend. Questo è l'adresso. Normal noi trascorrere weekend forte divertenti.
Beh, io vado per affari, non so se potrò. Comunque la ringrazio molto. Ma lei porta sempre gli occhiali da sole?
Solo all'estero.
Ah, ecco.
Then up next here I have Dracula in the Provinces, also goes by the original title of Il Cave Constantine Nicosia de Monaco Uvero Dracula in Brezania. And I actually kind of realized that this really means the dynamic womanizer Constantine Nicosia or Dracula in Brianzia. So yeah, a lot of title there. So this is from 1975, directed by Fulci. This was written amongst Pupi Avati, Bruno Carbucci, Mario Amendola, and Fulci. And then there's also a couple other people here who did some additional dialogue as well. Let me make sure that I give them credit for some of the things they do. They just didn't necessarily write as much as some of those other people, and those would be Enzo Giannacci and Giuseppe Viola. So this is starring Lando Bruzanca, Rosanio Brazzi, and Silva Cosina, while also featuring here the likes of Moria Orfi, Krista Linder, John Steiner, Francesco Romana Coluzzo, Grazia Di Marza, Antonio Alocchi, Granza Spradano, Franco Nebbia, Michele Cimarosa, Cam Paolo Rossi, Cancino Ingrassi, Valentin Cortesi, Franca Martelli, Mauro Vestri, and Ugo Farareggi. And so this is an Italian comedy horror film that is from Italy, currently sitting on a 5.6 on IMDb and a 3.1 on Letterboxd, or synopsis being Constantine Nicosia, an arrogant, wealthy toothpaste factory owner, is a terror to his wife and everybody else. After a brush with superstitious gypsy aunt and a business trip to Romania, where he meets the suave vampire Count Dragulescu, portrayed by... Oh, I'll come back to that. Nicosia returns with blood-sucking qualities that force him to re-examine his life. So that Count was portrayed by Steiner, was what I was going to say. And then Nicosia is portrayed by Bazanka. But this is a film that I learned about when searching for films from our co-director, writer here of Fulci. I was setting up my watches for Italian Horror Month and saw that this was from 1975 and considered in genre. So it was a tricky one to find, as there was a couple on YouTube presented different issues. Seeing this was a horror comedy, both intrigued and made me leery, and I'll kind of get into that why as well. So I've already brought up Fulci, so I'll skip down to an assistant director that we have here of Victor Torjansky. He did this on 14 features. I've seen 2. Both are in genre, with this and The Black Cat with Fulci. Did 4 total in genre, with the 2 that I haven't seen being Man from Deep River and The Dead Are Alive. So then to the writing room, let's start with Amendola. He wrote 141 features, first that I've seen. Did one other one in horror with The Haunted House from 1982. Next is going to be Carbucci. He came up previously with Castle of Blood. I've now seen 2 of his 123 works for 1%. He's done 5 in genre, and I've now seen 2 for 40%. I have not seen The Blancheville Monster, Web of the Spider, or The Haunted House. Next is Avanti. He has 59 motion pictures. I've seen 3, all in genre. He did Salo, The House of Laughing Windows, and this. He has 16 total in genre. I've not seen Macabre, Zeter, or Arcane Sorcerer. Then Viola did additional dialogue. He has 2 credits. Only one that he's done in genre, and only one that I've seen. Now we also have Giannacci. Also did additional dialogue. He's worked on 4 films. First that I've seen, only one in genre. Then to our cast. Let's start with Bazanka. He has been in 91 movies. First that I've seen, only time he's worked in genre. Then to his co-star of Brazzi, was in 120 works. I've seen him previously in Omen 3, The Final Conflict. He did 6 total in horror. I have not seen Formula for a Murder, Frankenstein's Castle of Freaks, Fatal Frames, or Sex of the Devil. Then I'll look at Cosina. She has 119 credits. I've seen 2 thus far, both in horror. She has 10 in genre. I've seen this and Lisa and the Devil. Top 3 that I haven't yet are Marquis de Sade's Justine, So Sweet, So Dead, and The Crimes of the Black Cat. I'm also going to give credit here to Steiner, because I know he's definitely a genre regular. He's been in 79 films. I've seen 5. Not horror, I've seen 1967's Bedazzled, and then Sinbad of the Seven Seas. In horror, he has 10. I've seen Tenebrae, Cut and Run, and now this. For horror, the top 3 that I'm missing are Shock, Body Count, and The Devil Within Her. So then here, now we start at a basketball game. What we'll learn is that the president of the team is Nicosia. The only reason he has bought this team or is like the head of it is to advertise his product. What we'll learn here is that he's married to Mariu, portrayed by Cosina, to help further his career. I will say is that there is some love there, but she's more concerned with keeping up her beauty. Her rebuttals lead him to have a wandering eye. Now, something else to include from the synopsis is that he's highly superstitious. He almost crashes his car when he's with his wife when a black cat runs across the road. There's also another moment where there's a mirror in their home that breaks and he seeks out his aunt Maria, portrayed by Spadaro. Now, what I didn't realize until later is that she's a Romani, and she's clearly eccentric as well. So now the big event here that changes everything for Nicosia is when he goes on a business trip to Eastern Europe, which I believe is probably end up Romania. He meets Count Dragulescu. Now, the Count invites him over, and what Nicosia sees shocks him in the best way possible. That would be, I would actually have to say. There are 4 beautiful women who end up getting naked pretty quickly after they arrive there. They all sit down for dinner in the nude and alcohol starts flowing. This leads us to a change coming over Nicosia, and we also kind of learn here that Dragulescu is a vampire. Nicosia has turned and the urges are even more insatiable and he needs blood to survive. So that's really my recap and introduction of the characters. Where I'm going to start is saying that this film is one that I need to revisit. For background, the first copy I settled in to watch on YouTube didn't have subtitles. Looked good though, pretty pristine. So the other one was in poor condition, so I couldn't really see much. Now the version I ended up watching was dubbed. It was difficult to hear, so this is one that I want to revisit either with clean audio or better subtitles. Now that it's set up, let's kind of delve into what we're getting here. I'm a fan of bringing in an old world monster into a modern setting. Having a ruthless businessman be turned is an interesting route to go. I say that because he could have gotten where he has because of taking advantage of people and using what is available to him. This has made him even more of a villain because of how he attacks people physically. Some are played for laughs, like he bites Mariu on the butt. He seeks out Dr. Paluzzo, portrayed by Brazzi, for help. He's struggling to find out what is wrong. So I do need to shift to a negative. A major one is that this is difficult to follow. Most of the comedy seems to be through dialogue, so much of it was lost on me. I will say and preface here by that the comedy can be something difficult that doesn't always translate. Words don't necessarily match up, so I wonder if that will truly help me or not. What I will say is that the bits of physical comedy made me chuckle. I'm not always the biggest comedy horror fan, so I might just not be the target audience. So I have a little bit of social commentary I want to delve into here and some social critique and satire of the rich that I do enjoy. We see that Nicosia is ruthless, so that tracks. There's also some comedy that hasn't aged overly well with how Nicosia is turned. He becomes concerned that he's been infected with being a homosexual because he wakes up in bed with Dragulescu. So the initial scene are kind of funny, but it becomes more problematic the longer we go on. Since I didn't necessarily state it, there's a commentary here on capitalism, the exploitation of the workers that comes with it. I did chuckle with the ending and what they do there, as Nicosia, how he's managing his condition. So that should be enough for the story. Let's go over to some of the actor performances. Bazanka is, good. He has a good look about him for this role. I also think his reactions work as well, whether it's seeing him aroused by the naked women when he's on his work trip or he can't contain himself by attacking Mariu. Cosina works as his wife, and we see that she really just wants to be a trophy wife. Now, her arc with her husband was odd. So Steiner works as Count Dragulescu. Brazzi is solid as a doctor here. And the rest of the cast were rounding this out for what was needed. All that's left then to be some filmmaking aspects for some trivia. This truly feels like a director for hire with Fulci, but I actually kind of read a little bit of the trivia ahead of time, so I'll come back to that. There isn't much in the way of his flair that I would expect with the cinematography and framing. It looks fine, though. No major issues there. I do like the subtle approach to the vampires. That seems more like a plot device and necessarily the focus of the movie. There isn't much in the way of effects outside of that. Soundtrack fit for what was needed without necessarily standing out as well. So then what I was saying here is that Fulci declared that this is his favorite among the films he directed. So, yeah. So right after principal shooting for the 4 of the Apocalypse was complete, director Fulci began working on a new comedy film in the vein of Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein. So I'm completely wrong. He actually was working on this from the start. This included comedy screenwriting team of Carbucci and Amendola, as well as Avati. Fulci then stated that Avati's contributions to the screenplay were only a few pages. Specifically, the trip to Romania, but did not to the trip to the nightclub, though. The dialogue of this film was revised to make it more spontaneous by Giannanci and Viola. This was shot in 8 weeks between March and April of 1975 as well. So in conclusion, this is a fascinating and flawed entry into the horror comedy genre, made more intriguing by its connection to the director Fulci. Despite some poor technical quality, audio and subtitles, the premise here of a classic vampire creature and ruthless Italian capitalism is solid. Bozanka is committed to the vampire, Nicosia, and the film function as an effective social satire on exploitation and the wealthy. While some of the humor is dated, Fulci seemed almost like a director for hire, even though he's not, and the film merits a revisit for a higher quality for its blend of genre tropes and sharp social critiques. So my rating, though, I still enjoyed this enough, even if I had my issues. So my rating here for Dracula in the Provinces, I give this one a 6 out of 10.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with out-of-this-world award-winning podcasts found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, out of this world.
And welcome back. So if you'd like to send me any sort of feedback, anything you want read on the show, or any screener requests, anything like that, you can send those to journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. If you'd like to read any of my written reviews or see any of the old past podcast episodes, all of that is being stored over at Journey with a Cinephile. That is my blog, and that's going to be horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to follow me and become friends on Facebook, it's going to be David Garrett Jr. is my name over on there. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be Buckeye from Mish. And then if you'd like to follow my Letterboxd page where I have all of my reviews, whether that's going to be horror or non-horror, that's going to be David OSU is my name on that. Instagram and Threads, I'm David OSU87. Over on my personal Instagram page, you might see some of my family stuff every now and then whenever I remember to post something. My wife is much better at it than I am. But then if you'd like to follow the Journey with a Cinephile Instagram, that's going to be Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. And then also direct you, if you'd like, to the Discord channel. That's going to be the Nightclub Discord, but I have a page over there. And there's also some other great pages of other shows and them kind of messing around and everything like that. Do highly recommend if you want to go ahead and check that out. And then the last thing I'll actually say here, if you would like to listen to the show a day early, this is always going to be streaming over there on the Pod Nation TV app. So I will have, once again, a link in the show notes for that if that is something that you're interested in. So yeah, there's some great stuff here. There's some great shows on some of these other networks and stuff. I highly recommend checking them out. And then for my next episode, is going to be 315, is going to be my Mario Bava double feature. I believe the two reviews that I'm going to be doing, I believe I was able to find both of them, is going to be Planet of the Vampires and the House of Exorcism. And then the Voyage of the Fives rewatch, I have not seen this since college, is going to be Cut and Run. And then I have a couple more screeners I need to check out, as well as I'm going to try to fit in some more Italian horror movies in there as well. So I don't think there's anything else I need to hear save for this outro, except that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending